Rome didn't survive on marble and aqueducts. It survived because someone was willing to stand in things no soldier would touch and get paid in something worth more than gold. Every empire had jobs so disgusting they were erased from the history books. But here's the rule nobody tells you. The worse the job, the closer you stood to real power. Today, 5 ancient jobs that would break you before lunch and what surviving them actually bought. Number 1. Rome. The urine collectors. Let's start in Rome. A civilization famous for aqueducts, concrete domes, and togas so blinding white, they practically needed their own security detail. Here's the part your Latin teacher left out. Those togas got clean in vats of human urine, and somebody had to go collect it. Rome had no soap. What it had was urea, the ammonia-rich compound sitting in every single chamber pot in the city, and Roman launderers, called fullers, figured out that stale urine-bleached wool better than anything else on earth. So the streets filled with big clay jars, and citizens were invited to relieve themselves straight into the public supply chain, no questions asked. The urine sat for a day or two, turned into ammonia as it fermented, and got hauled off to fulling workshops, where workers climbed into vats of it barefoot and stomped on dirty laundry for hours on end. A wine harvest nobody in their right mind would drink. This wasn't some back alley hustle either. It was profitable enough that the Emperor Vespasian put an actual tax on collecting urine from Rome's public toilets. When his own son complained that taxing pee was beneath the dignity of an emperor, Vespasian held up a gold coin and asked if it smelled bad. Titus admitted it didn't, yet it comes from urine, Vespasian said. And 2,000 years later, we're still using his logic to justify every questionable paycheck in existence. So somewhere in Rome, on any given afternoon, there was a person standing calf-deep in warm, fermenting piss, funding an empire one stomped toga at a time, while the senators who wore that toga never once thought about where the shine came from. Rome ran on marble on the outside and urine on the inside. Keep that pairing in mind because it's about to come back. Number 2, Egypt, the Ripper. Now cross the Mediterranean into Egypt, where the worst job in the country wasn't about cleaning up a mess. It was about creating one, on purpose, on the body of somebody's dead father. Mummification took around 70 days and an entire assembly line of specialists, priests who recited the right prayers, embalmers who packed the body in salt, artisans who wrapped it in hundreds of yards of linen. But before any of the sacred, respectable parts could begin, somebody had to actually cut the corpse open. That job belonged to a man the ancient Greeks called the slitter, and according to the historian Diodorus Siculus, the second he made that first incision along the body's flank with a sharpened stone blade, he didn't stick around to admire his work. He ran. Because the other embalmers, standing right there in the room, would immediately start hurling stones at him and shouting curses, condemning him for the violence of cutting a fellow human being. Sit with that for a second. Everyone in that room knew the incision had to happen. It was step 1 of turning a corpse into an eternal being who would walk whole into the afterlife. And yet the one man licensed to actually do it, the only person in Egypt legally allowed to make that cut, got treated like a criminal the instant it was finished, symbolically chased out of the room so the real embalmers could step in, clean-handed, and take all the credit for preserving him for eternity. One profession, 2 completely different reputations, assigned about 5 minutes apart. And that's not a strange one-off custom. That's basically the operating manual for every job on this list. Someone has to touch the unbearable part, so everyone else doesn't have to, and then gets punished, mocked, or quietly erased for having touched it at all. Number 3, Babylon, the surgeons. Now here's a job that sounds respectable on paper. Physician, surgeon, healer. Until you read the fine print of the actual law that governed it. Under the Code of Hammurabi, carved into a stone pillar in Babylon nearly 4,000 years ago, a surgeon who performed a major operation and successfully saved his patient's life could expect a real payday. Up to 10 shekels of silver for treating a nobleman, less for a commoner, even less for a slave. Good, stable money by ancient standards. But flip to the very next clause, and the deal turns brutal without warning. If that same operation killed the patient, or the surgeon's blade destroyed an eye while trying to save one, the punishment was carved in that same permanent stone. His hands were cut off, on the spot, ending the exact career that had just failed, along with any future one. So picture being handed a bronze lancet and a dying nobleman, fully aware that the two hands doing the cutting are the collateral on the operation. Every surgery in Babylon was a bet placed with your own body. No insurance, no malpractice hearing, no appeal, just a verdict written in stone before you were even born. It's no wonder Babylonian medicine developed a reputation for extreme caution, bordering on paralysis. When the downside of "I did my best" is amputation, you stop taking risks you don't absolutely have to take. Modern surgeons complain about malpractice insurance premiums. Babylonian surgeons could have told them a story about malpractice that never involved a single insurance form. Just a very sharp, very final line item at the bottom of the law. Number 4. China. The imperial eunuchs. Now for a job where the entry fee was the single highest price a human body can pay. And the reward, if you survived, could be an entire empire. To serve inside the inner walls of China's Forbidden City, close enough to the emperor's own family to be trusted around his wives, concubines, and heirs, a man first had to be castrated. A procedure performed for most of Chinese history without anesthesia by specialists whose entire trade was this one brutal, irreversible operation. Historical accounts describe a recovery that could stretch on for months, wounds that killed a meaningful number of candidates before they ever set foot inside the palace, and boys as young as 9 or 10 years old going through with it anyway. Usually because their families were poor enough that a mutilated son with a guaranteed palace salary beat a healthy son with no future at all. Here's the part that made the horror worth it. For the ones who lived through it, eunuchs couldn't father children, which meant they could never start a rival dynasty of their own. That single fact made emperors trust them in a way they'd never trust an ambitious general or a scheming minister with sons to inherit his grudges. Over centuries, that trust let eunuchs climb into positions running entire branches of the imperial government, closer to the throne, closer to real decision-making than almost anyone else alive, wielding a kind of influence that generals bled on battlefields for and still never got. The price of admission was something no amount of ambition should have to cost. For the ones who survived it, so unbelievably, was the payoff. Number 5. Egypt, the tomb builders of Deir el-Medina. And finally, the job that built eternity itself, tucked inside a village that wasn't even supposed to exist on any map. In a hidden settlement called Deir el-Medina, on the west bank of the Nile, Egypt kept a permanent workforce of stonecutters, plasterers, and artists, whose entire career was carving and painting the secret tombs of the Valley of the Kings. The very same tombs tourists now pay to walk through with a flashlight and a ticket. It was specialized, skilled, genuinely respected work, and by the standards of the ancient world, these workers were paid reasonably well in monthly grain rations for exactly one reason. The state needed their silence and their loyalty even more than it needed their craftsmanship, and grain was how you bought both. Then, in the 29th year of the reign of Rameses III, around 1157 BC, the grain payments simply stopped showing up. Not once, repeatedly, for weeks at a stretch, while officials higher up the chain focused their energy on planning the next royal festival instead of fixing the problem underneath their own capital. So the workers who built the eternal resting places of gods on earth did something that, as far as the surviving record shows, had apparently never been formally done before in Egyptian history. They put down their chisels, walked off the job, and sat down directly in front of the mortuary temples, refusing to move until someone finally paid them what they were owed. Officials, in a truly baffled move, tried sending over pastries as a peace offering. The workers wanted grain, not dessert, and they said so. This is now recognized by historians as the earliest recorded labor strike in human history, roughly 31 centuries before anyone had invented the word union. The men who built eternity for kings couldn't get those same kings to feed them on time. And when it finally came down to it, the ones who built the afterlife were the ones who taught the ancient world its very first lesson. Power without labor underneath it is just an expensive, empty hole in a mountain. 5 jobs, 4 civilizations, thousands of miles and thousands of years apart, and one rule that never once changed. Whoever stood closest to death, disgust, or disaster stood closest to power too. They just almost never got to keep any of it for themselves. The urine collector helped fund an empire he'd never be allowed to sit at the top of. The eunuch could run half a dynasty he could never inherit. The tomb builders carved forever for kings who couldn't spare them one extra bag of grain until the day they simply stopped asking nicely. So the next time your job feels unbearable, remember, somewhere roughly 4,000 years ago, a man got both of his hands cut off in Babylon for genuinely trying his best. Your Monday could be worse. It almost certainly has been for someone. Comment below and tell me which of these 5 jobs you think you could actually have survived. Because I have a strong feeling most of us are lying to ourselves.